What's up guys, my name is Devin Sumner and welcome to Some Investing, where the goal of this channel is to make investing terms incredibly simple for the beginner to average investor. Today we are talking about something really important called return on equity, or better known as ROE. Now, what is ROE and why should we care? Return on equity, essentially at its most simple form, tells you whether you should stay in on an investment or release your funds and move it into something that will give you a better return. Now, what exactly is equity? Equity at its most simple form is essentially the amount of cash that you would walk away with if you sold your property today. Now that we know what equity is, how do we actually increase that? You can control these in two different ways. One of them you can control, the other not so much. The first way is simply paying your mortgage. Every single mortgage payment that you make, you are paying principal, which is the actual amount of money that you borrowed, as opposed to the interest or the price to borrow that amount of money to purchase the property. The second would simply be overall market appreciation. Normally, on average, the housing market appreciates 3 to 5% every single year. Today, in our example, we're going to be talking about ROE specifically within the real estate asset class, and even more specifically, owning rental properties. Now, whenever you're talking about return on equity, we're going to allow some time to pass. So we're actually going to create two different scenarios here where we purchase a house and we see our ROE in year 1, as opposed to 5 years later, we run our numbers again once we've paid down a little bit of that principal within our mortgage payment, as well as market appreciation and the down payment that we put in. Let's keep it very, very simple. Let's say we're buying a $300,000 house with a 20% down payment. 20% of $300,000 is $60,000. So in year 1, the only equity that you have in that house is actually the down payment of $60,000. Now here's where ROE comes in. Remember, this is a rental property, so we're going to be charging rent every month, and it costs money or expenses to own that asset or that rental property. So let's say, for the sake of today's example, we have $2,000 a month in rent and $1,500 in expenses. Whenever you subtract $1,500 from $2,000, you get $500 in cash flow. Now, if we were trying to figure out our cash flow for the entire year, we would take that initial $500 in cash flow every month, multiply that by 12 months of the year, and we would get $6,000. So for year 1, what we're going to do is we're going to take that total annualized return, or the cash flow, of $6,000, and we're going to divide that by the equity that we have currently in the property, which is only $60,000 that we initially invested. Now that we have our ROE for year 1 of 10%, let's go ahead and fast forward 5 years of owning this rental property and see how that number changes. So let's just say, for easy math, we're appreciating at 3% every single year. If we have a $300,000 house in year 1 and 5 years later we're appreciating 3% per year, we're going to end up with around $350,000. It's technically $347,000 and some change there, but let's just round up for easy numbers. So what this actually means is that we have an additional $50,000 in equity built into our property just through market appreciation. Because remember, that house that we bought for $300,000, the market is now saying that it is worth $350,000. The second thing to consider is that principal down payment. Let's say you are $25,000 closer to paying off that loan. Now you have a principal pay down of $25,000 to also add into the equity there. So when we add these three very important things together, we have that initial down payment of $60,000, we have that $50,000 in market appreciation, as well as the $25,000 in our principal pay down. When you add all of those together, our new equity that we have in that property 5 years later is going to be $135,000. Remember, this is a rental property. So 5 years ago, we were charging $2,000 in rent. Just through simple inflation alone, which is on average 3% a year, let's go ahead and raise the rent as well as the expenses, unfortunately, 3% every single year for 5 years for this example. After we do that, you're going to get $2,300 in rent every single month and $1,700 in expenses. Whenever you go ahead and you subtract the expenses from your income, you're going to get $600 a month in monthly cash flow. For the year, you're going to get $7,200. Remember, year 1, we had $60,000 in equity. Year 5, we had $135,000 in equity. So to find ROE in year 5, we're going to simply take that cash flow number of $7,200 for the year, divide that by $135,000 in equity that we built over the course of 5 years. Once you do that, you will actually get 0.053. Now, let's just go ahead and round that down to 0.05. Remember to find the percentage, multiply it by 100, and you will get 5% return on equity for year 5. Now that we found our ROE for year 1 and year 5, what the heck do we do with this and what does it even mean? What it simply means is essentially, should you keep your money there or should you move it somewhere else for a better return? In year 1, you got an ROE of 10%, which is pretty solid. On average, for the last century, the stock market has given a 10% return. So you can kind of gauge your ROE and ROI off of that to see if your money would be better utilized somewhere else. All right. I know my head's hurting too. I try to keep the math really simple, but we cannot avoid some of these mathematical equations and computing rent and interest rates and all that stuff. But I hope that you guys just basically got the understanding that ROE means, should you keep your money there or should you move it somewhere else for a better return? All right, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time.